So this is an unscripted thing. And you can tell because I'm in my pajamas. I have a cup of coffee and an International Harvester mug. Um, um, this video is going to be unedited. It's about GitLab, I guess. I think we whoever we is are still figuring out what the lo-fi computer collective is going to be, but people keep asking, and I think it's a wide variety of ideas that are sometimes easier to explain in contrast to the ideas they are not, or the ideas we think are bad. And I think the present, the recent moves by GitLab are probably a good example of that. So they recently broke all their URLs. They changed issues, which is like the thing that we've been calling them since God made dirt, or at least Tom made GitLab, GitHub, whichever one he made, because they're all the same. Like this is the thing, is that all these pieces of software are the same. They all do the same thing. And I'm not talking about Git forges. I'm talking about everything that we use. And there's innovation there, but the idea that you need to, the word that kind of like nerd sniped me on is this nerd sniping? I'm making a video. This isn't very nerdy. That caught me on Mastodon was accelerate. And I thought we were over that in like 2021. The idea that you need to accelerate is very weird. Like it implies that we have somewhere to go that we haven't already been. I'm old. You can tell by my bad haircut and the fact that I'm balding. The software we have is mostly the same as it was in the 90s. Like we have faster internet now, and my laptop is, I can take it apart and upgrade the memory. That's great. But like calendars, the calendar software, it's not notably better. Email software is not notably better than it was in 1995. Like I remember sending emails in 1995. Maybe delivery was a little less certain, but it was also less of a pain in the ass to run your own email server. So, 6 of 1. The GitLab shift that pushes everybody to say, oh, now we need to go to Forgio, or now we need to switch to something else. This idea that we need to constantly be jumping from one piece of software to another is predicated on this notion that software can't ever really be done. And when I say done, okay, I had to start again because someone was stomping on the stairs. Where was I? Done. That software can be done. I don't mean like, C64 done and it's baked forever, or like a Dreamcast disc or whatever. I mean the idea that software kind of reaches a point where it's like good. Is that a synonym for done? Where like video chat software, you open it and then you click the button and then the video chat goes, kind of like picking up the phone in the 80s. Like why is that not a thing? Because we have the technology, right? Like we can do this. We can do it. But for some reason you get like sparkle emoji AI slop button on your video chat, which you don't need that. Or I mean, maybe you can get it optional or something. So this notion is there's this sort of these two sides. I was saying to Fel just now on Mastodon that we sort of have these two camps, right? Like you have the camp of like boring old software that works and like boring technology and stable libraries and minimum dependencies and sensible engineering. And then you have this other side that's like acceleration and the next big thing, and that's my neighbor stomping. Excitement, right? And so I think the difficulty that I perceive is that this can be exciting, like boring can be exciting. And I think that just stable and it works and it's good and it's polished. It has a brand probably, right? Like I'm probably going to say a bunch of things that people find mildly controversial here. And I'm not, I didn't write a script for this. I'm in my pajamas. I just woke up. What? The feeling that I get from everybody that I know in both camps, because I know people in both camps, like I live in both these worlds for better or for worse, is tired, right? Like everybody's just tired. They're tired of having new technology and new GPUs shoved down their throats. They're tired of this constant push by management, whoever that is, right, in the organization that you work for, pushing you to grind harder because now you have machines that can help you work. And so it's this funny world of like the boring tech people, the free software people are angry and anti-LLM and anti-AI, whatever AI is supposed to be, but at the moment it's LLMs. And everyone with a normal ass job is committed to a form of like, I mean, my grandmother was an indentured servant, so I realize I'm being flippant when I say this, but it's like it's a sort of form of indentured servitude, right? Where, and to some degree it's self-imposed, where people were accustomed to a certain lifestyle as software developers or SREs, and now that's getting yanked away because of how companies expect you to build software. And you hear these stories about large, healthy organizations burning themselves to the ground because they feel like they're missing out on something. So build software faster, because that was always the problem. I mean, it's interesting because I hear this argument from the other side, which was like the typing speed of software development was like never the problem. It was never the limiting factor. And it's like, kind of that's true, but also no, right? Like the fact that you can produce and modify, and I think modify is the interesting bit, software faster now, does change things. The problem is that nobody knows how it changes anything, because this is relatively new. And I mean, arguably, it's only been good for 6 months ish, and for some value of good, right? Like it will get better, but the bubble's about to burst. And so kind of what you have right now is it's edging its way up toward like the thing that it's going to be for a while. And you'll see these incremental improvements, but the money will fall out of it. The industry will find another grift, right? And the tool that's left over after all the carnage is it's useful. It's useful. Does it write software on its own? No, that's not a thing. Like, we don't have robots that make software for us. That doesn't exist. But I mean, for a competent SRE, for a competent software developer, it's a useful tool. This isn't about LLMs. But like the GitLab thing is about LLMs. It's kind of like we're agent first or some crap, right? Like, I don't even know what any of that means. I've used LLMs. I don't let them touch Git. You can't run Git commands. What? You can write a function for me. The idea that these things are changing the landscape of the industry, I mean, it's true, but the problem that the lo-fi computer collective, lo-fi software collective, I mean, we'll probably never make hardware. Lo-fi is not incorporated on purpose. I think probably we will at some point, but I don't know what the corporate structure is going to look like. I also don't know who's going to be in it. It's going to probably have a bit of a constitution where the thing you believe in is just like software that's good. And I realize that sounds like a low bar, but the nature of software today is, I think it kind of has its origin story in early computing, right? It's kind of like the 70s, 80s, and 90s. You had a lot of like uncertainty about what a computer was and what could it do. Like in 1995, it was kind of like, will you ever do your banking on your computer? Maybe. Maybe you will, but I don't know if I trust the computer to do that for me right now. And that lack of trust it's kind of justified, right? Because one of the other things that LLMs do is they find security issues, and we're going to see probably a big swath of those, which will harden the software. So if you follow Daniel and you follow like the curl thing, like curl is just getting better because of this stuff. And curl is it's a good example of a piece of software that's like, it's good and it's done for some value of done, right? Like, there's never been, what was the GitLab post? It's like GitLab version 2 story, the version 2 of the story, or some stupid marketing bullshit. You don't get that with a piece of software like curl, right? Like, curl doesn't have a marketing department. They're not driven by people who feel that the revenue model outstrips the software itself in terms of importance. And so curl is like, it's good. It's good software. Everybody uses it. It works. It does the thing it does. It's not done in the sense that it's like baked forever. It's done in the sense that it doesn't deteriorate. And this seems to be the case with a lot of like enterprise and consumer software that we have, that it's just like, oh, it sort of deteriorates over time. But also open source software. The thing about open source is that like humans need to eat, and so you need money from somewhere. And if the way that you're building your open source is a slush fund from Facebook, I still call it Facebook, or Google, or wherever, that kind of like says like, we have a team and they're off on the side here, and as long as we're making $1 trillion, you can have some scraps to like build your open source. Like, fuck that. No, that revenue models are real. Capitalism is real. These are structures that society survives on, right? And so if the idea is that you need to build your open source as this weird little subservient piece of some other gigantic corporation that makes its money in some other way, sooner or later, it's going to get thrown out. It's kind of amazing to me how long some of these teams have survived in these large corporations, but it's not open source first. Google executives use the sentence, "We are not an open source company." And so if you're getting your open source from Google, right? Like a company that's like, we're actively not open source. That's not what we do. We do it over here as a hobby, right? We have a hobby of open source. There needs to be a model that supports these things. And in some cases, right, like SQLite and other small projects, the model can be consulting. That's fine. It's small projects. SQLite is, which is bigger, SQLite or curl? That's answer in the comments. Is that what people say on YouTube? The thing is that open source is not really like the end all be all, and open source has this. I'm really going all over the place. I'm sorry. Open source has this kind of historical, I don't know, when lots of people smoke in a building, is that called a patina? Would you consider it a patina when there's like a lot of cigarette smoke on the walls, where like you basically need to burn the building down to like get rid of the cigarette smoke, because no matter how many coats of paint you put on top of it, the building still stinks like smoke. Open source has a patina. What are we going to call it? A patina of garbage, like garbage design and kind of garbage UX and garbage UI. And there's this old 1997 attitude of like the software breaks, or I heard the CEO of a company that makes significant open source software say something to the effect of like, oh yeah, every once in a while somebody loses their thesis and they get mad at us. It's like, this is insane. This is insane, right? That you build software and you're like, it's fine if we lose your critical data, right? Like it's open source, so go fuck yourself. That attitude is so warped. And so old people need to die, and then, we'll have young people replace them. It's the same as politics, right? Like politics moves forward because the old people die, and open source will move forward because the old people die. And their bad ideas will go with them. And so the idea that like software can lose data and it's fine, the idea that software can be like fundamentally broken in terms of its user experience and it's fine, this is insanity. Just because the software is open source. I mean, sure, if you're like one person and it's a hobby project and like you threw it together in a weekend, or just like a thing that you do and it's not core to the ecosystem in some way, then that's different. And there are these kind of like legacy pieces of software that sit somewhere in the middle, where it's like somehow, I'm not picking on libxml2, but like like these libraries or the tools that was like, half the world depends on this by whoops. I never meant to do that. There's a lot of that stuff that also needs to like move under another umbrella. And the umbrella is not Google. The umbrella is an open source, like a free software company that has a revenue model, right? The revenue model is never going to make them $1 trillion. It just won't. Consulting it ebbs and flows, right? There's risk to consulting. So preferably the revenue model is services. Like preferably somebody pays the company for compute and disk, because those are the two things we have. And the company marks them up a little bit, and there does feel like there's a bit of a moment right now where individuals and corporations are both learning that they can't trust certain entities. And so there's kind of like the curlness, the doneness of software. And then there's the trustworthiness of the software. And I think that the problem, and it's a marketing problem, that a lot of projects and products face is that nobody knows how to trust software. I saw this I saw this video last night that a friend sent me, and my friend Matt is in it, so I pinged him, about HTTPS and how silly and what is it called? Security maxing, toxic security maxing. It was very cute. You get the little lock in your address bar, right? Like that. And, oh, I can trust it. Okay. So you get little badges, and that's kind of how people trust a thing. And so a brand is a badge. Like I trust Ubuntu, or I trust Apple, or I trust the little Microsoft Windows icon, right? Like I trust a thing. It's labeled in a certain way. I trust USDA organic, right? Like I trust a thing, or I don't, or I have some measured nuanced trust, like organic. I kind of know what that means because I've bothered to, read. And it's not all great, but it's not all awful either. It's, bad for farmers and bad for the environment, but like good for other reasons. That trustworthiness is a thing that we need to work on. And by we, I just mean humans, society. And we'll figure out how to explain to users that software is trustworthy. Another argument that I've heard recently that is very outdated is the complaint around the term users. And like the classic thing is like, we use that same word for drug addicts, and like, yeah, we do. That has nothing to do with anything. I don't understand this complaint. We have a word, and we use that word pretty consistently. Like people, I am a user of this computer that I'm looking at, and I'm a user of OBS Studio, which is what I'm recording this on. And I have no intention whatsoever of ever becoming an OBS Studio developer. Like I don't give a shit. I'm not going to open the code. I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to audit it. And there's this kind of, again, in the open source community, the free software community, more so, right? If you're going to bother differentiating between those, and I think you probably should still, or again, because we didn't for like 15 years. The idea that someone can look under the hood, essential, right? Like very important. The idea that they should is inane. Like nobody is going to go look at the source code of the software that they use, even software developers, right? We just don't, right? We don't have infinite time. We can't go digging around in every library and service and app that we consume. And so there are trust metrics around this stuff. I think this is actually a thing that FlatHub does really well. And Flatpak generally, like, to be on GNOME for a second, right? GNOME in the like Linux desktop ecosystem is like, you go to install a thing and it has some badges, right? And it's kind of like, how risky is this thing to you? Other software delivery mechanisms also have, supply chain information and like risk information associated with them, and that's A+ good, yay. And we're like, we'll figure this out over time, like what users are comfortable with and what they're not. And a different generation of users will also be comfortable with different things. The thing you can't expect of them is that you just would throw them under the bus with the idea that they should be able to like look at the source code and read the source code and figure it out for themselves, right? They're not like a 1950s dad in like Midwest America insisting that their kid learn how to change the oil on their car or some crap, right? So using software that you can trust, so kind of, good software that gets done. It reaches a point of done. And then there's a trustworthiness that we haven't really figured out yet. A component of that is just free software. And hey, I can call back to GitLab, right? Like GitLab was never free software. It was always open source-ish, open core. It always had this fatal flaw, right? And like, there were times where there were features that were not open source. And so then organizations that insist that they want to consume and run open source software were kind of stuck. But there's also this sort of California venture capital building for the sake of building sort of attitude that is baked into a piece of software like that that's kind of fundamentally flawed. And part of the trust badges that you come up with is you need to figure out a way to avoid the situation where things get rug pulled. Because saying something is open core is, I mean, sure, that's useful, but like that's not the only criterion, right? Like there are other situations where a very fully open source piece of software closed their license or, turned on their users for profit. There are ways to mitigate these risks, and you can do it in this kind of collaborative way where like the organization provides some mitigation and the users say like, yes, we acknowledge this and thank you for that. And we'll kind of like, we'll both be in on this thing. Like you will sell cars with seatbelts and we will prefer cars with seatbelts. And then maybe the government says like, you can only sell cars with seatbelts. There are corporate structures that support this stuff. Nonprofits in Europe, I would say nonprofits in the United States are problematic for so many reasons that have nothing to do with politics. 501c3s in the United States cannot have software as their like core mission. They open source software. They just can't. Like that's not allowed. You can't spell it out the way that you would want. And you can in Europe. So maybe go over there. Don't if you are doing like a new open source nonprofit, don't do it in the United States. I mean, for other reasons also, but politics aside. But there are also corporate structures that work, right? Like cooperatives are real cooperatives, not we kind of sort of behave like a cooperative. Real cooperatives, which are harder. They have stricter legislation, stricter compliance. They are hard to run. And so you probably don't want to like build a gajillion of these. And so this is part of the reason that like the Lo-Fi Computer Collective, Lo-Fi Software Collective, whatever, Lo-Fi, right? Part of the reason it's not a co-op, or that it isn't yet, and it's also not a nonprofit, because I'm not entirely confident that like Canadian nonprofits won't suffer from some of the same problems that American nonprofits do. You also need to solve the international organization problem, which is, it's non-trivial, right? And so there's going to be some measure of overhead in that, but you can find structures that are the least bad and have the greatest longevity and that users can trust the most. Anyway, I'm kind of off track here with corporate structured stuff. So, let's pause on trust by way of corporation. I think that's a long road. Like real users will get that second or third hand, right? So it's kind of like someone very technical, a writer at Wired or whatever, will say like, this corporate structure is good. And then someone will just go, okay, I trust you. Because like trust and reputation are like, there's a network effect. It's a graph, right? So like people aren't trusting the software you build or the company you build or the nonprofit you stand up. They're trusting other people who trust those things. And that trust it's kind of at a useful juncture right now where everything is broken, which is kind of good. Like it's a good time to be like, oh, like it's broken everywhere, so let's rebuild, or not rebuild, but like build some new stuff that doesn't have necessarily the same failure characteristics of the organizations and the institutions and the, in some cases, legislation that we had before. So what was I saying? That we're going to set all of that aside. Corporate. I'd love to talk about that more, and I will at some point, but the idea that software can be done is great, but that's not the whole thing on its own. There needs to be some ethos to like the software that you're building. And I've sort of implied that a lot of that ethos is going to be like free software and open source, right? Because trust badges, like how do you trust a thing? It's the whole right to repair equation, right? Like you don't need to repair it yourself, but it needs to be repairable by somebody, and you need to be able to, you own it, you have control, like you buy the thing and then you get it. Or you don't buy the thing. You go rent some services and it happens to be over here. So this is, oh man, I'm going to move my microphone back a little. This is why I was mentioning earlier that it's time to like recreate the distinction between open source and free software. Not because the original distinction was very interesting, it wasn't, but now you have a useful distinction, which is service-oriented tooling, right? And there can be a central service, and that thing can also be like self-hostable. Not necessarily that you self-host it, because self-hosting is awful. It's Satan, right? Nobody wants to run their own servers. That's why people are willing to pay for services, and they will. Corporations in particular don't want gigantic IT departments. They never did. They're willing to outsource those things. And so if something is self-hostable, it needs to be free software. It can't be open source, because you can sneak open core into open source pretty easily. And like, nobody wants a Hacker News thread with 1,500 comments. There's like debating the terminology of open source and open core and whatever. Just free software is like, nobody's going to mislabel GitLab free software, right? They just won't, because it's not at all. Free software has this kind of like absolutism sort of ethos to it. And absolutism has its own set of problems, but you're going to find it an easier time, amongst nerds, right? Like, real people don't give a shit about open source and free software and those things. They don't even care about the trust badge, right? That, like, if you put weirdly, the OSI logo is probably like the one that you would use, even though it's open source, because the logo matters. Anyway, to go back to the software itself, so not how it's licensed and not how it's delivered and not who is making it, what corporation, and like what is their revenue model, and they need a revenue model. The software, I saw this, it was never released. It was a website that Tobias Bernard had designed. Tobias, I'm sorry, I know it is non-European pronunciations of people's names. And I've debated with him about these things that I'm discussing, and he doesn't agree with me about all of it. But the website that he had designed that wasn't released had this like very clear set of like 4 concepts, right? And so 2 of them are already kind of like baked into the notion of free software is like ethical, but like ethical beyond just free software. That like you can sell free software, you can give away free software, you can create free software that steals people's data and like identities and stuff, right? So ethics isn't baked into free software, it's just licensing. It is an ethical framework of a sort, but it isn't the end all be all of ethics. And one of the other points was upstream first, which makes a lot of sense to me, right? We have this issue at the moment where desktop Linux is kind of having a heyday. And what distro do you tell people to install? Like, what is the answer to that question? There should only be one, right? Like, if my mom and dad want to install it, well, my dad has installed Linux before, but like, if they wanted to install Linux on their Windows 10 or Windows 11 PCs today, like, what Linux do I tell them to do? Who knows, right? There isn't an answer to that question. Like, Ubuntu has had all sorts of, I mean, it's the same set of issues Ubuntu has always had, kind of like technical direction, that were like vacillating around, and then they always walk away from the sort of custom thing that they build, it seems like. Fedora is like, is a 6-month cycle, is that going to be fine? I mean, who knows? macOS seems to release like every 2 weeks now, so maybe end users are comfortable with this, but like there isn't a good like go-to where you say like, this is the one, here's the Linux distro, here's Linux, right? Like, just get Linux. and install it. Or preferably buy a computer with Linux pre-installed. And so at the moment, probably the closest thing is like, a Slimbook if you're in Europe, or Framework with like the Ubuntu deal. But the reason upstream first matters here is that you don't want the packagers to become the people who define the brand. You just don't. You want the brand to be kind of like through the whole thing. And so this is one of the other points on Tobias's website that was never released, which was full stack, right? It's kind of like all the way down to the kernel, all the way up to like the widgets and the colors and stuff that you see. That's inherently a good idea in terms of like how you're actually delivering software to people. And so the fourth item, which I haven't mentioned, is design first. And I think that this is going all the way back to this idea of like open source as being kind of inherently jank, and the like open source contributors or open source maintainers are like willing to sort of like throw the user under the bus. Maybe because they're not paid to do the thing that they do, or maybe because they're tired, or maybe because it's 1998, right? And it's just, these are new ideas. But in this day and age, the software, everything needs to be designed first. And I mean, we learned this, I think, from Apple, that like industrial design can be a huge component of how this stuff is delivered. I mean, Sun Microsystems made some very pretty hardware, and like other people did, but I think that no one would argue that Apple really did it best. They're kind of like the size and the shape of the thing, the way that it feels in your hand, right? Like all the way down into the software. And like at once upon a time, the software was efficient and well made, and they took a lot of pride in their engineering. That like, it's kind of, like German car manufacturers or Japanese knives. Some like there's this sort of like craftsmanship to the thing, but also fashion, right? Like it's not purely utilitarian. I think this old image is very utilitarian. It's like, oh, it doesn't have a feature you like, send the patch. Like nothing could be more utilitarian than that. The idea that the software is designed, and that the design drives the software, and that the software is beautiful and comfortable to use, and preferably the most comfortable thing to use, like more comfortable than, Google Meet or Microsoft Excel or whatever. Excel's a high bar. Google Meet's a very low bar. Just about anything would be more comfortable than Google Meet. It never works for me like 9 out of 10 times. So what do we mean by this, right? What do we mean by something that's beautiful and enjoyable to use and well designed? I think that I'm going to say that design is everything, right? Like good software, like is well designed. It's not just about the user interface. It's the internals. It's the way you construct your data model. It's the way that you think about network traffic. It's the way that you think about events, right? My hardware went offline because I got out of range of a cell phone tower or whatever. That dealing with failure modes, that's design, right? So like I got the same message twice. How do I deal with that? Do I deal with it gracefully? Like part of my disk is corrupted. Am I dealing with that gracefully? Design is through everything. And so design is everything. And I think that there is a sort of belief that I've held for a while, which is that really support is everything, because support is where design meets the user, right? Like nobody is like crafting this perfect, beautiful, like globe and then throwing it over the wall and being like, okay, now have fun with that. Like there's no communication, there's no feedback, there's no understanding of what users actually want. Did they enjoy the globe? Did they like how it felt in their hands? Did they like the weight? Did they like how it rolled? When it smashed into a wall, like, was it resilient? Did it have a nice failure mode? I don't know why it's a globe. Everything about the technology delivery experience it's all bound up, right? You can't escape any part of it. And this is, again, part of kind of the like classic failure of free software and open source, is that there's this idea that it's kind of over the wall, right? It's kind of like I build it, and like if you want to come participate, if you want to hack on it, and only for some projects, right? But that, like, then you're allowed in, and then you're allowed to talk to me. But otherwise, there's no support person. There's no 1-800 number you can call. There's no Genius bar. There's nothing. Like you get in there and you read the code, or you be happy with whatever you got. And that's probably a very, 1997, 2002 kind of attitude. Like, I realize many open source projects don't run like this anymore, but many do. And support, I think, really begins with design, like, or vice versa. That understanding the needs of the user, and, not just doing what they say, but digesting what they actually require and what will help them the most. So avoiding kind of faster horse territory, but also at the same time avoiding the, God forbid, like GitLab acceleration territory. We're like, it's exciting, it's new. Oh, wow, amazing. Exciting new software. It's like, nothing is exciting, nothing is new. And I would love it if we could just settle down and build some stable software that just worked. And that software needs to be good, and good isn't just that it's not chasing every weird little fad, but that it's well designed. And so I have this, I forget who, I've discussed this with a few people recently, but someone brought it up with me. Oh, it was someone from the Jupyter team, someone who works on Jupyter Hub. He brought it up independently. This is the thing that I've believed for like quite a long time. And the thing is that if you watch a movie, his joke was about like, you watch a movie and like the way you can tell it's a movie and the way you can tell it's not real is because they just click a button and like the video chat works. Like it opens video chat and then they close the lid of their laptop, right? That's how they always close a video call. They don't click the little red X or whatever. I always think that's fun. But it's the beginning. It's the beginning that like just works out of the box every time. And he's like, it should be like that, but like that's movie material that it does just work like that. And I pick on video calls a little bit because they're kind of nuanced, right? It's like, which audio device does the video call thing choose for you? Like, does it choose the last one? Does it choose your preferred default? Like, there are some questions here. How does it inform you? Does it warn you if there's something wrong, right? Like failure modes. And so he had this thing of like, it just works, right? Like you click the button and it just works. And I have this thing of like the whole environment, movies, but preferably cartoons, right? Like that's your design canvas, right? It's like, imagine you're in a cartoon and the character is working on a word processor, or the character is using a text chat, or the character is, watching a video on like YouTube equivalent or whatever. Probably there aren't going to be a bunch of like shorts and ads and garbage on the screen because it's ugly. Like that kind of ugliness isn't going to be there in a cartoon, or probably even a movie. And so you're not going to have that like kind of dystopian realism of like the garbagey bits of the web and of the internet and of the computing experience. You're just going to have like the features. It's like, oh yeah, we just have, here's the button you click to hang up, right? Like that's here's the font button. It's really, here's bullet list or whatever. That canvas, that kind of example of like, what is the most fundamental thing that the user is trying to get at? Like what are they trying to do? And then just give them that, right? Like don't hypothesize about what features a user might want. Don't try to make it, don't try to satisfy a technical itch that you want to scratch for yourself. Like, does it need to be multiplayer? A lot of things don't, right? Like, how often do you modify a document with other humans simultaneously? It's awful. It's mostly awful, right? Like, the tendency is, unless you're actually working in a collaborative session simultaneously, like we're on a call and we're on a document, working together the way that you would pairing at a desk, which is a thing most people didn't do in physical offices, or, very irregularly. Like most of the time, your collaboration is like one person goes off and modifies the document, and then there's a draft, and then the other person takes a look and makes some modifications and suggestions and whatever. This is someone else in this household writes, like clinical trial white papers for a living, and that is the process. Like you don't have like multiple doctors smashing on the white paper at the same time. That's not how it works. So we can do like high velocity collaborative tooling, but a lot of people just don't want that. And so there's this kind of territory of like, what are you solving for? And are you solving to scratch your own itch? Which is, if you're doing it for fun, then great. But like if you're doing it because you're building software under a corporation and you intend to sell a service associated with that software, then you probably want to think about like what the end user actually requires out of the thing. And what's interesting to me about this is that like maybe you end up with like highly collaborative software for most things, like optionally at least, maybe. But like those are hard problems to solve technically, to solve well, right? Like where the failure scenarios are are good and people don't lose data and everything. The versioning works the way that you want. And so these design problems, they are rooted in support. They're rooted in and it's almost like a philosophical question. It's like, what is support? What are you supporting? You're not supporting the software you built in an ivory tower and then like it meets the user. Like you're defining the software in terms of like what users actually need. And so it is a relationship, and the design process needs to be very thoughtful and very nuanced, and it needs to be full stack, right? So all the way down to the tiniest details of the way that the networking stack behaves, for instance, right? Like those things need to be considerations for designers. So like the designer can't just sit off in Figma somewhere and draw cute buttons. That's not design. Real design incorporates everything. And so this is, I'm not going to prop up like FlatHub and GNOME too much, but I do think that they do this really well, right? Like you have designers that are talking about the nitty gritty specifics of like what actually happens in the underlying tooling and libraries, and like inside the shell, and like what are the interactions between the different processes. That's essential to make a piece of software that actually like looks good and works and like works across all these different failure modes and like feels coherent. I haven't used KDE in a long time. Maybe KDE also has like a design team that really like takes control of this stuff. I'm not sure. So I apologize to the KDE people. I think obviously Microsoft and Apple have these people, right? And they have teams that are collaborating, but those tools are failing for the incorporation and institution reasons, and for the trust reasons, and for the licensing and delivery reasons. Like those don't work. Right? It's kind of like they worked for a while. Like people were fine with certainly older macOS versions. There was a point where arguably it was good, but you knew it was going to fail you at some point. It's going to fail you because of these kind of like fundamental issues around the way that the corporation is structured and the trustworthiness of the thing. And the premise of this whole video is just that like so many of us are tired, and particularly those of us kind of, if you're at the end of your career, you can kind of laugh, I think, and be like, haha, yeah, or like, oh, the ecosystem of software and whatever, like maybe it'll never be better. But for those of us in middle age, we've seen how the decades have progressed, right? And I think there's a reason that retro computing is like so attractive to some people right now. And conversely, right, there's a reason that home labs and self-hosting and stuff are attractive to people right now. And these are huge nerds in both camps, right? But they're attracted to making the situation better, like for themselves or just for fun. But they want to experience an Amiga because it was good. It was good. Like it did what it said on the tin. And they want to know what that feels like, and they want to see like, where did it fall down? Because it wasn't perfect. But there is a drive that I've seen in so many people who really, really want to participate in this. Like they want software that the user can own, and that the user can control, and that they can control their own data, and that then the user, whether that user is an individual or a family or a massive corporation or government or university, doesn't matter. Sorry, that's my Discord that I'm going to close. I should have closed earlier. Closed. I'm not going to edit this at all. It's just me saying a bunch of stuff. Software developers in particular really, really want to make good tools. And I think part of the reason that people are tired is because for many people, not all, the process of developing software and the end result of the software that they were building was unpleasant in a lot of ways. Like, you would get these kind of directives from the organization you worked for, and you would build a thing, and that thing would maybe be bad, or it would be a bad idea, or it landed poorly with users, but you didn't have enough agency to like fix that situation. And the best software teams learned to find ways to navigate that. And it's interesting in consulting and consultancies in particular, that it's somebody else's business, right? And you're learning to navigate that territory for somebody else's business. You don't own the business. You don't benefit from the well-being of that organization, but you can participate, and you can help smooth out those edges. And I think that people get joy from that, like making good software, making bad software better. Like sometimes there's such a thing as like a refactoring project or like a rewrite where you just go in and you don't even add new functionality. You just make it, arguably faster and more reliable is functionality in this kind of like holistic design is everything, support is everything kind of worldview. Worldview? I don't know if I can call it that. There is a world, I think, where all of, maybe not all, but many of these people who are going home on the weekends or in the evening, they're probably already at home. Most of them work from home, but they go to a different room and they pull out their Amiga or whatever, or they pull out their toy hardware and they start experimenting and playing with the thing that they enjoy, that they feels like a high quality thing, or well made. And a lot of that stuff is either old or it's open source, right? Like those are the things that they're playing with. I think that there is a world upcoming where they can do that at work, right? Like they can build something that they believe in wholeheartedly at work, and it can be good and it can be very polished. I think my go-to example for sort of like, what am I talking about here? Like, am I just whining about the state of software? No, not particularly. Like, I think that there are actually really exciting things that we can do in the world of software, but we spend a lot of time kind of like spinning our wheels on the same old stuff. And this GitLab situation is that, right? Like, I don't need so much new out of my Git forge. I want it to reliably accept my pushes, and I want PRs or MRs or whatever to work. It would be neat, actually, if instead of those like mutative processes that any of these Git forges supported patches, the value of values and all that sort of thing. that there's like some kind of conversation mechanism, that there's some little bit of project management maybe in them. Preferably that stuff is like baked into the system rather than this sort of like third party tacked on thing, that the way it is in like GitHub, at least, where you move off of GitHub, oh no, like your issues and your project management wall and whatever, where do they go? My go-to example is Excel, right? Like Excel 97. It was done. It was done. It was a done piece of software. Like, unless you are a day trader or a really hardcore accountant, like the features from Excel 97 were enough for like 99.9% of Excel users, I think. And if not Excel 97, then somewhere in the early 2000s, because they just haven't really added features to Excel since then. And that's the picture, right? Where it's sort of like you can polish that thing up forever. You always can. And maybe there's some service associated with it. Like there's a place to store your spreadsheets in the cloud or whatever. That's helpful to lots of organizations. You add dark mode. You internationalize and make it more accessible. Great. A+. Like those are hard problems to solve. And those are kind of the last mile problems in a lot of projects. Very few projects have the bandwidth or the wherewithal to front load the accessibility and the internationalization and the localization. It's hard to do. That's the world that I would like to see, is where the Excel 97 world, where we just we had that thing and then we polished it up and made it accessible to everyone. And now it's like, here you go. Like we have a tool for you, and it's one that you're familiar with. It's one that you're comfortable with. And then if you moved away from the spreadsheet available in Excel 97, you would move to something else, right? Like a different tool. And there's reason to believe that like you could have sort of a paradigm shift away from classic spreadsheets, like InfoCalc, Excel style spreadsheets, and to something more database oriented, or like that had schemas or different data models or something. Like that's a thing that you can believe in, but that's a different tool probably, or maybe it's a fork of this one. Who knows? So this idea that these things can be full stack suggests something else. This wasn't a component of Tobias's website, I don't think, but it's certainly a thing that I believe in, which is that you need to start having fairly strong opinions. So you will need to believe more in Wayland than X11 or whatever, right? You need to like believe in Nginx over Apache or whatever. Like you are making choices. You're not saying this thing that we're building is the end all be all for everyone and every other tool. You'll still make it modular to some degree where other people can bring their own, and particularly because it's free software, then other people are able to bring their own and they're able to fork. But if the thing that you're building is full stack for real, top to bottom, and the bottom is like the hardware and the kernel and the drivers and libraries and environments, whether that's on a phone or a tablet or a laptop or whatever, and at the top is like hypervisors and the cloud and like the space where you store your data and your databases and whatever, that like all of this should live together in a meaningful way. And so I think that Apple does like an okay job of keeping everything tied together in a fairly coherent way. The cracks really start to show up if you talk to people who like have bought fully into Apple, and it's just like, the ecosystem, it's not as integrated as you would think. My phone talks to my laptop, but like beyond that, and then there's kind of, the Microsoft ecosystem and arguably the Google ecosystem, but like more the Microsoft ecosystem, where like things are a little more flexible and hideous. Like it's just, they make ugly stuff. So the space is somewhere between these two, preferably pretty and well designed and attractive and like coherently integrated within itself, and preferably more enterprise focused, because that's where your revenue streams are going to come from, right? So these things come together somewhere in the middle, and you have cloud services of some kind, and you have like the actual delivery of computers and phones, printers, the full stack, right? Like all the things, networking, hardware, eventually maybe. We're fully in fantasy land, so why not? It was like, none of this is probably realistic. It does feel like this is maybe a doable thing right now. You have a lot of people around the globe who are interested in doing this work. You have a lot of people who are dissatisfied with the state of computing in 2026. And there is an argument to be made that augmenting the process of moving toward whatever this is with LLMs is like not crazy, right? Like you're not producing software with LLMs, but you're augmenting the software development process because typing the code was never the bottleneck. It's true, right? Like I believe that support and understanding business requirements and design, like this is a real bottleneck. These are the hard bits to get right, but you still have to write the code, right? And so the best engineers I know, the best developers I know, like they are using LLMs, and not because they're lazy, right? And not because they don't have the skills. It does allow them to do more. And so if the thing that you're trying to do is to replace kind of a legacy ecosystem with what I'll just term good and boring software, a lot of that stuff already exists, but a lot of it needs to be brought together and polished and presented as a product, a free software product. And the product that you're selling is a service, probably in almost all cases. Maybe you sell phones, right? Here's a phone. It comes with some free software operating system or something. But I think that's a really high bar relative to the cloud infrastructure and like cloud delivery of, enterprise tooling, state of the world, right? Like that stuff is, it's easier to get a toehold on. It's easier for someone to build a business out of. And to my knowledge, this doesn't exist, right? Like I don't think that there are a couple of businesses that are sort of roughly in this territory. I really like Entei, the photo sharing thing, but it's very like B2C. It's their own thing. It's a ground up like creation. it isn't a modification of existing open source free software. It's not adapting that into a wider ecosystem of things. Like it's not upstream first, right? Because there is no upstream. They are the upstream. So that's okay. There's okay for there to be this picture where like upstream and downstream are the same thing. And arguably maybe that's a good picture. But it is different. It lacks this trust bit of like resilience and kind of like federation, for like the email version of federation, right? Like federation that works and everybody uses, not Mastodon or Blue Sky or whatever. So this is an idea that like unhelpfully I can't point to a thing and say to you, here's an example, here it exists over here, like we just need to duplicate what these people are doing, or like get on board with what they're doing, get a job over there and work with them. It doesn't exist. If you have an example of something that you think fits this bill, I would love to hear it. I'm interested. But I do think that the first step actually isn't to like incorporate a company and decide that like you're going to take over the world. The first step is to like breathe, slow down, and realize that there's nothing to be anxious about with any of this. The anxiety, the stress comes from this kind of like hamster wheel of forever trying to chase like a non-existent horizon. This stuff that these companies are doing right now is not useful by and large, right? And so I think you're going to see this kind of like closing scene of all of this activity, and probably these companies are going to reshift back into a different mode, but it's just going to be the old mode from like 2016 all over again. They're not going to like move forward and be like, oh, we learned our lesson. Users want something stable and solid and resilient. It's not going to like 10x your revenue ever to sell that as the pitch. You will establish a stable business with a sensible business model if you were to do this. I believe it doesn't exist, so maybe not. Who knows? What does Steve know? But I think that it's worth attempting in the near future. And I think that this sort of tiredness, that I don't know if it's a Lo-Fi Computer Collective. I mean, it's just a website right now. It's not a thing, but something that believes, and the Modal Collective is a better example, right? They're actually building things, and they're experimenting, and they're looking at like they're kind of grant driven right now is my understanding, but they're kind of looking at other revenue models and figuring out like how do they want to structure themselves. And so I think that there's if they become a nonprofit, which they might, that's like an option, I think, to create new nonprofits that are rather rather than kind of the classic like tacking a nonprofit on top of a successful open source project, like do it from the ground up with a nonprofit that is focused on open source and free software. That would be good. That would be healthy. But I think there also needs to be a commercial component. I think there also needs to be like a real revenue model or set of revenue models, like diversified revenue that keeps the sustainability moving. I don't see that being something other than services. Recurring revenue is really, it's really great for running a business or maintaining anything. There's a reason that we shifted completely to recurring revenue for the GNOME Foundation. It's because like living your life year to year as a corporation of any kind is living your life month to month as an individual. Like you don't want to be forever starving. And so recurring revenue matters. And different organizations will solve that problem in different ways, but it needs to be solved. And now we've come full circle back to the organizational stuff. I think I'll close this by saying, weirdly, it's kind of a relief to see that GitLab is like flailing and you can at least kind of mark them and be like, oh, okay, it's not going to work out. That's too bad. And you can start looking at alternatives, preferably simpler single purpose alternatives. Maybe that's Forgio. I don't know. I think that's how you pronounce it. Forgio. Forgio. That's branding. Branding is a part of design. Worry about your branding. Yeah. I think that we're bound to see more of this over the coming years. And when the AI LLM bubble pops, which it will, 6 to 18 months, are we 3 to 15 months? Like where are we in the soon-ish relatively? It will pop. And then we'll have something else to contend with, right? Because these companies aren't just they're gonna be like, oh, okay, back to normal mode of operations, that they'll try to find something else to excite their investors or to justify. Hopefully they invite some of their employees back, because I think that there are a lot of people out there that are really struggling with the current situation. But I'm also hoping that people who are extremely skilled and excited about better computers start getting together and start building organizations that actually make that happen. I think it's a good time for it, and weirdly, it's easier now than ever. So good luck if you happen to be one of those people. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking. Bye.